Welcome back to the Register's Report. Again, my name is John Buckley. I'm the Register of Deeds of Plymouth County. In this segment of the show, we always do something educational in nature. We've had commercial lenders, commercial real estate people, surveyors, appraisers, many realtors. In this show today, we're going to talk a little bit about the Community Preservation Act and the registry's role in it. The number one community in Plymouth County for recordings has become the town of Plymouth. And the registry collects surcharges for the Community Preservation Fund on every document that is recorded. The only one that is not $50, it had previously been $20, is the Homestead Act, which is $25. But every other document that's recorded has a fee charged for community preservation. At the end of every month, we collect that money and we mail it into the state, who has a community preservation fund from which they distribute money to the communities that have accepted the Community Preservation Act. And Bill, great to have you again.
Thank you for having me.
You have been one of the leaders personally, as well as your committee in the state, at making great use of the community preservation money. Unfortunately, there are still some communities that are leaving money on the table, but you guys jumped on it early, and credit to the town for that, and to you.
Thank you, John. Yes, the Community Preservation Act was adopted in the town of Plymouth in the year 2002. So we're approaching 21 years, closing in on 22 years of CPA in Plymouth. Over that period of time, the committee has been committed to its original presentation to the voters. It was adopted. The CPA in Plymouth serves at the pleasure of the voters. We feel we have a social contract with the voters on the use of this fund. The fund can be used for housing, historical, and open space. And we're required under the Mass General Law to put out an application. That's the core of the Community Preservation Act. We have an application. Anyone can apply for these funds. If they have a historical resource they want to see preserved, they fill out the application. If they want to create affordable housing, the application is designed for them to apply for this money to help them create affordable housing. And when it comes to open space, it's the same way. The application is designed around people who own land or entities that own land that are looking to sell their land. And when we buy land for the fair market value. That we've been able to engage and compete in the open market to preserve some of the most at-risk land in Plymouth that protects our water supply, protects our habitat, and actually provides open space for passive and recreational usages. We build parks, we build trails. It's a very important component of the CPA. During the pandemic, we saw a surge in these usages of these outdoor spaces. So during that period, we learned a lot over the last 21 years. We also learned that when implementing the affordable housing component, it can be quite expensive. It's not an easy task because you have to partner with an entity that has the ability to receive the monies and use these monies to build these units of housing. So we work with the Plymouth Housing Authority. We work with the Task Force for the Homeless. We work for Habitat for Humanity. We work with the Coalition for the Homeless here in Plymouth. We work with as many housing organizations that we can work. We actually do outreach. We reach out to these housing organizations and ask them, do you know that this is a fund here? Do you have a project that we could partner with? So we have to not only create an application, but we have to be proactive in our attracting good applications, especially when it comes to housing, because like I said before, it's a very costly component to implement, and there's only a small network of entities that are designed to build housing. What we have been finding in recent years is looking for private developers to partner with them to see if we can build into their proposed developments before the town of Plymouth. They might be looking at permits special permits associated with inclusionary zoning where they get to build more units of housing. In exchange, the town gets a certain number of those units deemed affordable. So we like to work with entities. We've had success building housing with private developers, but it's important to work with the nonprofit organizations and in the state, in looking for state and federal funds to leverage what money we have in Plymouth, because most of the activities that we're involved in is partnering with other people with money or looking at grants and leveraging that. Because what we've noticed over the last 20 years is that initially when we adopted the CPA, we were getting 100% match. It was the go-go early 2000s where the trust fund was bringing in quite a bit of money through the registry and all the people that were buying and selling. That was a very active time between 2000 and 2006 and 7. It was a very active time. When the housing crisis came in 2008, things slowed. But one of the things that we found is that even though our match was dropping with the state, our expertise, our understanding, our partnerships, and going after and partnering with organizations that were bringing money to the table or going after grants, we were able to make up the difference. So in Plymouth, for every dollar we put down for purchasing open space, building community housing, or protecting a historical landmark, we're actually bringing in another $2.50 to match our $1. So the leverage capability of the CPA in Plymouth has been pretty impressive over the years, and that's because we've been able to work with all the different boards and committees in Plymouth. Town meeting is the ultimate decision maker on the use of the fund. We only recommend. One of the things I've always said about the CPA is that it demonstrates that when a community comes proactive addressing these issues, the money's there to do it, but really the experience of having a discussion educates people about the possibilities of a community bettering itself and being proactive in addressing affordable housing. People sometimes feel as if we can't build the housing. It's too daunting of a task, or we can't save that land, or we can't save that old building. I think the CPA gives people the energy to realize that if we all work together, we can actually build a better community. And this is, I see, as an opportunity to build morale around how governments work and how effective they can be. So the CPA has been a very exciting entity to work with over the last 20 years.
So as part of the adoption process by a community, I know there's a percent that goes on to the property taxes.
Correct. Yeah.
And what is Plymouth's right now?
So when we adopted it in 2002, May 11, 2002, we proposed to the voters that we go with a 1.5% surcharge. We could have asked for 3, but we wanted to be cost efficient. We wanted to be cautious about the stress that a taxpayer is paying. On their quarterly month bill now, 1.5% is added onto that. When the town assessor's office and the treasurer's office collects that money, it is put into accounts that the finance department sets up. 10% of the money that comes in each quarter has to go into housing, 10% for historical preservation, 10% for open space. The remaining amount is reserved, the 70, for discretionary use around housing, historical, and open space. We can use it as a component. We could use it all for housing, all for historical, all for open space. But what we've tried to do over the years is balance that discretionary amount. But you are required by law to set aside 10% for housing, historical, and open space each year. And if you don't use it that year, it just compounds to the next year.
So in the early days of the CPA, as we call it, there weren't many communities that were involved with it. That has grown incredibly over the years. Plymouth County today, there's probably only 5 communities that have not adopted the CPA.
Well, one of the things that we were able to do early on in the year 2000, in 2 and 3 and 4, is once we passed it in Plymouth, we partnered with the Community Preservation Coalition. And the coalition in the committee reached out to Kingston, in Carver, and Wareham, and Bourne. We noticed the towns around us were suffering from the same crisis that we were suffering from when it came to affordable housing and historical preservation and open space acquisitions. And so we went and engaged those communities and helped them get it on the ballot, organize a campaign, and get it adopted. Sometimes it took more than one try. But now, 22 years later, a lot of these towns realize that this fund, utilized strategically, has been quite beneficial. And it has to maintain that efficiency status with the voters, because it's not like your general revenue fund where that is required statutory. The money has to come in for your fire, your police, your school. The CPA serves at the pleasure of the voters. The voters determine if it stays or goes. And that's why I always say that it's very, very important that we use the money in a very strategic way to demonstrate that it is paying its way. That's why that pie chart that we present at town meeting often shows the $1 that the taxpayer of Plymouth is putting in the $2.50 that $2.50 to $3 that it attracts in grants and partnerships in our efforts. So the leverage is incredibly important to the committee.
Well, every year we do a summary of how much was collected on recordings for every community. And there's an unaffiliated one because some documents come in not generally documents not identified by town. And that list has generated interest in towns to move forward with it, realizing that if they don't do it, you're leaving money on the table.
Exactly. So, regardless if you have adopted the CPA in a town or not, you're still going to be seeing funds eliminated from the community. Every time someone buys a house in your town or sells a house or refinances a house in your town, those proceeds go to the trust fund and are given to other towns to help them with affordable housing.
You're charged as recording fees.
Right. It's very important that towns adopt the CPA, because right now, whether you have the CPA or don't have the CPA, you're still going to see these funds collected by the registry, regardless if you're a member. So that has been a strong argument for towns to adopt it, because the money's already being collected. Do you want to keep it in your town, or do you want to see it go to the state and distribute it to other towns?
So let's talk about some of your most memorable projects over the period of time that you've been involved, which seems like a long time.
Well, I think one of the more memorable ones, I think, was we were lucky early on the Community Preservation Committee to have Joan Pimentel, who was the director of the Housing Authority in the town of Plymouth for many years. By the time we formed the CPA in 2002, she has an institutional knowledge that we were able to take advantage of and expand Cherry Hill, which is a housing authority complex in downtown Plymouth. Her guidance there was giving us the knowledge of where we could find matching funds, where we could find tax credits, where we could leverage our housing money to create and expand the housing authority for the town of Plymouth. We learned a great deal, and we took from that information, and we utilized it to our advantage on other aspects. But when it comes to open space, I always look back at southern Plymouth at Center Hill Preserve. Center Hill Preserve was a parcel of land that was owned by the Jocelyn Diabetes Foundation, nearly 70 acres of land, 28 of it on Cape Cod Bay with a coastal plain pond and nearly half mile of ocean front. The property went up for sale. The Community Preservation Committee realized and learned of this, and we approached Jocelyn and we presented them an opportunity, and we went to town meeting and we acquired it. And one of the things that we were able to acquire, it was quite costly at over $4.5 million, but we were able to apply for a grant with the Wirelands Trust of Southeastern Massachusetts in coastal zone management here in Massachusetts. We were able to apply for a KELP grant. And the KELP grant brought in almost $2.5 million to help us pay for that. Wow. So they're the leverage we were excited about, but we also saved from development along our coast one of the most pristine, undeveloped pieces of land. I often think of the Henry David Thoreau had traveled through Southern Plymouth in the 1840s when writing a journal called the Cape Cod, and he wrote about this parcel specifically, traveling to it, spending time at Ellisville Harbor. So we thought it was very interesting that almost 200 years later, we were poised to preserve what Thoreau had experienced and written about in his journal called Cape Cod. And then when it comes to historical preservation, obviously saving the 1820 courthouse from the wrecking ball and renovating it into a new town hall complex. Yeah, renovating that. But right now across the street is kind of an interesting story. It's the 1886 Methodist Church, acquired by Beth Jacob Synagogue in 1979. They operated it until 2010, when they approached the Community Preservation Committee saying they had this building. They thought it was a building of substance and should be preserved, but they no longer had a use for it.
It's part of your landscape.
Yeah, it's a landscape building. Yeah. Its spire in downtown Plymouth is an attraction. We entered into an agreement with Beth Jacob, along with the GPAC, which is the Greater Performing Arts Center of Plymouth, the Spire Theater, as it's now known. We went to town meeting, and we were able to buy that building for around $280,000. Wow. And then we also asked town meeting to set aside historical preservation money to renovate the building so that GPAC could convert it into a performance arts center, which they did. And for 10 years, they ran their center. They raised money. They made their building ADA compliant, elevators, fire suppression systems, structural work. They invested quite a bit in the building, which we acquired with town meeting funds and signed a 100-year lease with them. So their work over a 10-year period was quite impressive. And that's where we are today, where we went back to town meeting last year and secured $3.6 million to restore the exterior of the building back to 1886, restore the roof, the windows, the siding. This was a major restoration effort. We had done quite a bit of cost analysis to find out what it was going to cost. But when we put it out to bid, the good news was the bids came in almost $900,000 less than what we had asked town meeting. That money will be returned to the fund. So we were very happy to see that the estimates that came in were quite manageable, and town meeting was happy to see the money returned back to the CPA fund. And right now we're in the phases of the restoration of the building. So right now when you drive by the Spire Theater, you'll see the scaffolding up on the building. They're carefully removing the layers of paint, the aluminum siding. There's been some damage to the trim, which they have repaired. And they're going to return the exterior of the building back to a color scheme that was determined by a paint analysis that is very reminiscent of 1886. A lot of greens and creams and reds. It's going to be quite spectacular when they take down the siding, the scaffolding, and you see what people saw in 1886 we'll see for the first time in 2023.
Well, unfortunately our time is running out, but I remember there were some other projects that you guys were very innovative with, and I remember the bell in Town Square, which you had to create an easement in order to get the funding approved within our private facility. But you know, you guys have done a great job over the years. I always point to people thinking about doing the CPA to talk to you, and I very much appreciate you sharing all this information with our viewers.
Well, I know that I speak for myself as a member of the Community Preservation Committee and other committees around the county. Your commitment to historical preservation, your commitment to the Community Preservation Act is greatly appreciated. Thank you, John.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.